It is Wednesday, and glad that you're with us here on the Ben Swann Radio Show on RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network. Welcome, Zach Bohannon. Good to see you, man.
Welcome to you, Ben Swann.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a webcam working, so folks can't see your awesome Macho Man hat with the sunglasses on it.
That's right. I've got another one that has his picture on it, posing, flexing with his Macho Man shirt on. Both mesh trucker hats.
Of course.
WWE will market anything.
In what form of hat would you wear this other than a mesh trucker hat?
Nothing else except maybe a fitted baseball hat or perhaps a military-style cadet hat.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, it's good to have you here, and glad that you folks are with us as well. A great guest coming on today. We've got Mark Walters. He is with USCCA, or the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. When we're talking with him, including about the story where Chipotle is now banning guns inside of their restaurant. Tear. It's so sad
I know.
for me to hear this, because I love
Yummy.
Chipotle. I love those guys.
I do too.
And I love the way they run their company. I love a lot of things about them. And actually, they've been very cool about this for a long time. And of course, the pressure comes from the Moms for Action, the Michael Bloomberg-backed fake mom group.
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't call it a fake mom group. There's probably real moms mixed in there, but it's not a mom group, right? It's a billionaire who's funding this group, calling it a mom group. Anyways, we'll get into that more a little bit later, and kind of the situation that's unfolded with that. So we're interested in talking, though, with Mark a little bit about USCCA, what they're all about, and some of the battles they have in front of them. The concept of concealed carry is such an important one, and one that media misses so many important stories on. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with him later today. In the meantime, a couple things happening today. I actually have my TV off in here right now, but my understanding is we've got a possible round 2 of a filibuster with Rand Paul on the Senate floor today, and that he may be trying to filibuster over drones again. So, maybe in the far reaches of the internet called C-SPAN, we're able to locate it. But I'm not sure if he's started yet, but that is supposed to be happening today. So we'll be on top of that and kind of get a look at what's happening, with the situation there. Excited to see this take place. If it's going to happen, and by the way, it would happen on C-SPAN 2, because C-SPAN 2 is where we have the U.S. Senate. Yes, I'm online now, and it looks like it. And Barbara Boxer, with her fabulous silver hair, is up there, not Senator Rand Paul with his increasingly silver hair.
Oh, then don't tune in yet.
Yeah, so don't tune in.
There are like 3 C-SPANs, aren't there? C-SPAN 3? Or
there are
4
3
now,
C-SPANs, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so C-SPAN 2.
C-SPAN 1, C-SPAN 2, and C-SPAN 3. Okay. I guess if C-SPAN 1's just C-SPAN.
Yeah, regular.
So, it'll be interesting to see what happens and kind of what takes place here, but should be interesting. I'm hopeful, because I think the last time it was very impressive to see the shift in public opinion just with that tiny little bit, of exposure that he was able to give to the issue. So, hopefully he's able to do the same thing again.
How many hours did he go last time? Was it? Oh, it was like. I
thought it was 16 or 17 hours, something like that.
It's almost a full day.
Yeah.
Almost a full 24.
He was up there for quite a while. Now, he was actually bested by Ted Cruz in his filibuster.
That's right, yeah. Ted outlasted him.
He did. So, that's what she said. Sorry, it was too easy.
Wow, you have derailed already.
Yes, already off the rails. Absolutely. Here, we'll shift gears and talk about this story at benswann.com today, specifically about whether or not the U.S. is actually behind a rogue general's coup in Libya. Would it surprise you at all to hear this? On May 14th, the U.S. Marines announced the deployment of 200 Marines to Sicily and southern Italy as a crisis response force for Libya. They did so at the behest of the U.S. State Department, who at the time insisted there was no specific threat nor any imminent plan to evacuate the embassy in Tripoli. Just 4 days later, General Khalifa Hifter It looks an awful lot like Hitler.
It does.
Hifter and his self-proclaimed Libyan National Army attacked Tripoli, took over parliament, and announced his intention to purge the nation of Islamists, starting with the parliamentarians themselves. Very similar, by the way, to what we saw happen in Egypt. It's General Hifter's second attempted coup this year seems to be going quite a bit better than the February fiasco, which began with statements announcing his takeover and never really expanded much beyond that. The timing of the Marine deployment suggests this latest move did not come as a major surprise to the administration, but Hifter's U.S. connections may run much deeper. General Hifter got his start and his generalship as a close ally to Muammar Gaddafi, but changed sides when he was captured during the failed late 80s invasion of Chad. Released at the behest of the U.S., after which he was set up as a military leader in the National Front for the Salvation of Libya, the NFSL, is a rebel faction based out of Chad, which was backed by, who else? The CIA. The NFSL didn't last much longer in Chad, however, as a takeover of Chad by Gaddafi ally Idris Deby led the U.S. to evacuate the rebels. Hifter quietly relocated to the D.C. suburbs after that and lived there through 2011. He then went to declare himself as a rebel leader during the fight that ousted Gaddafi. His post-revolution career has been perplexing, as General Hifter has hung around in Libya and often claimed to be a leader, if not the leader, in the Libyan military. But he never seems to have been formally appointed to any post of serious power. This guy sounds like a schmuck. It's like he's just kind of bouncing around thinking he's in charge of something, and maybe that's why he is being backed by the U.S.
He's looking for something to latch onto.
Exactly, and going to Washington, D.C. was probably a great move.
Great idea.
Eventually, the general got his army, or at least his self-styled army, forming the Libyan National Army, which has no official connection to Libya's actual army, but inexplicably has at times been able to muster attack helicopters and artillery in attacks on Islamist groups. The army has been fighting an on-again, off-again crusade against Islamist factions, with the government of former Prime Minister and former NFSL leader Ali Zidane mostly looking the other way. His attack on Benghazi on Friday seemed to change things considerably, and the new Libyan government was harshly critical of the operation, even sending the real military to the outskirts of the city to prevent either side from bringing more reinforcements to the battle. Instead of being chastened by his lack of government, Hifter's forces marched straight for Tripoli, and by Sunday had taken over the airport and the parliament. General Hifter has since taken over parliament as a den of Islamists. He's castigated them, as a den of Islamists. Whether the coup lasts remains to be seen, but he hit parliament just hours after Prime Minister Ahmed Maltik finally formed the first post-Zaidian government after 2 months of infighting over cabinet positions. General Hifter has bragged about his U.S. backing in the past, though exactly where he stands with the U.S. at present is unclear, as where he stands within Libya's military command. Does this story make any sense to you? I mean, this guy, it just seems like
I'm trying to make sense of it.
He's not really in a position to do anything, and yet it looks like he's getting something done.
Getting some traction.
And if you have attack helicopters and heavy artillery on your side, somebody's backing you.
Something's getting
It's
done.
not like you're going down to the Goodwill and saying, can I get one of those, refurbished attack helicopters?
That's right.
He's got some serious funding behind him right now.
Yeah.
So, listen, long and short of it, if you're looking at this story, would it surprise you to think that the U.S. is backing some clown who is attempting to take over Libya now, do their bidding? It shouldn't surprise you on any level if that's the case. That would be the MO that we see over and over and over again. It's just the game we play. And welcome back to the show. We were just saying during the break, you were pointing out, what's going on in Libya? What are we even doing? We go over there and we help to oust Gaddafi, and there's a lot of speculation about why that happened, what was actually taking place there, how much of that had to do with the gold that Gaddafi was storing up, trying to move the sale of oil away from the petrodollar. There are some people who think that's pretty conspiratorial. I actually don't think it's conspiratorial at all, because it was a fact that Gaddafi wanted to move oil away from the U.S. dollar and move it to gold. That's just good business. If you're a multinational corporation, and if you are the U.S. dependent on the U.S. dollar being strong, the only way to keep it as a reserve currency for the world is to keep it connected to petroleum. If it's not, and by the way, it won't be. So anytime within the next 20 years, I think we could expect to see the Chinese, the Russians, the Brazilians, South Africans, Indians, all of those BRICS nations, they are actively working right now to unhinge the U.S. dollar from petroleum. And if you don't see that, if you don't recognize that, and most Americans don't even know what's happening, right? Because our media does not talk about it in terms of mainstream national media. I'm not sure they've ever even used the term petrodollar or petroleum dollar
I've never
on network news. And yet, that's the reality of what our currency is kind of hinged on right now. And if you're not aware of this, if you're not aware of the fact that the U.S. dollar has no backing other than the fact that it's connected to petroleum, and every barrel of oil in the entire world, up until very recently, has been bought and sold in dollars, that has helped to protect and control the value of the U.S. dollar. And it's not coincidental, I don't think, that just 2 years after the United States abandoned officially the gold standard, that we signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia where the Saudis agreed to sell only in dollars oil, right? So it becomes a hedge. It becomes a protection. And that's going away. There's no question. Talk to anybody who is studying economics right now or is studying the BRICS countries, and they will tell you there are multiple meetings taking place around the globe on a regular basis that the U.S. is left out of, is not allowed to participate in, and the major discussion is trading oil in currencies other than in dollars. And when that happens, the U.S. public that is so convinced and feels so secure that the U.S. dollar will always be there and the U.S. dollar will always protect them and the U.S. dollar will always be a world's reserve currency, even without even knowing what that means. Because I think most people don't even know what it means to say the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. What does that even mean to them? They just have this assumption because pretty much for every generation that's alive today, they remember a time when the U.S. dollar was the most powerful currency in the world. We'll put it that way. If suddenly it is not, and suddenly the dollar sees hyperinflation, which we likely will, and we see this kind of collapse of the value of our dollar, and that monetary collapse that is coming, it's not going to be pretty.
No. One thing, I mean, this is a complicated issue, somewhat difficult for some of us to understand. But one thing is for sure, we got to have a backup plan for as far as the dollar is concerned, right? Mm-hmm. We can't put all our eggs in that basket. That's why we talk so much about Bitcoin and alternative kind of options.
That's right, and getting into gold and silver. If you're not into gold, you have to remember that the Chinese are allowing their own. This is a communist country, right? And I use communist in air quotes because I think they've moved so far away from communism. They're still very dictatorial, but they've moved very far from communism, including telling their people, go out and buy gold and silver, right? As individuals, you're allowed to buy it and collect it. India is doing the same thing. Why are they doing it? They want to buy precious metals. They want to store them up because they see the value of those. And ultimately, returning to, we talked with Chris Casey a couple weeks ago, you might remember, and he was talking about the fact that really around the world, these major nations are backing up their currency with precious metals and with gold and silver. So, again, if you go back to what specifically was taking place in Libya with the overthrow of Gaddafi. Gaddafi had given up his weapons of mass destruction. He had been trying to be a good player for a lot of years. And so the specific timing of that doesn't make any sense at all unless you look at something other than Gaddafi being guys like Bill O'Reilly will go, oh, remember that he's a terrorist, and remember this, the flight that he was involved in people being killed on that flight, and they'll bring up like all these things from the past. Well, but we don't do that with dictators around the world. We don't sit quietly by and wait for 30 years to go by and then say, now we need to go get them out of power. That's not how it works, unless there's a specific reason. And with Gaddafi, our government never gave a specific reason for why we were there doing what we were doing, other than to protect kids in one particular city where Gaddafi was going to supposedly go in there and kill a bunch of innocent people, right? And then we stayed for 2 months after that conducting airstrikes. So, and now we see this same situation again, where we've got another coup taking place and another U.S.-backed kind of goon who's in there to run the show. And what people have to remember, I got to hear this this woman when I was at United We Stand Fest in L.A., and she's a writer and a journalist, May Al-Hassin, I believe is her name, and she made a statement from the stage. She said, media gets it wrong when they talk about all these Middle Eastern countries and all these Arab countries and what's happening over there. And she says Arab Spring and the fight for revolution that's going on in all these different countries. She said it's not about democracy. The U.S. media and U.S. politicians keep talking about democracy and how the people there want democracy. And she says that they're not fighting for democracy. They're fighting for dignity. And that's the difference. And if you think about that, that makes a whole lot of sense, because what we assume people are looking for is a Jeffersonian type democracy in their nation, and they have no clue what that looks like. But they do have an inkling as to what dignity looks like. And the U.S. does not have a policy of supporting dignity around the world. We do have a policy of supporting governments that we think fit our interests, and overthrowing governments if they don't fit our interests. But actually fighting for dignity for the people is a whole other issue.
Is there another system, though, that provides as much dignity as a Jeffersonian democracy, or a constitutional republic, I guess is what we technically are, we've ceased to be, but is there another system? What kind of system would they want that would provide as much dignity as they're looking for?
So I think I would agree with you, but I would say it this way. I would say that dignity comes first, and a constitutional republic follows that.
Gotcha.
You cannot never insert dignity into a nation by giving it a constitutional republic. But you can bring people dignity, and out of that dignity construct a republic that defends their dignity. And I think we've done a very poor job of doing that.
Because dignity doesn't come from any sort of a construct or
it doesn't.
Governmental system. Even a constitutional republic, dignity is already inherent within the individual.
It's a natural right.
Nature, yeah.
That's right. And because we don't believe in that, as certainly not in our foreign policy, we don't believe that these people have natural rights. It allows us to continue to conduct the kind of overseas actions that we've been involved in for so long. It's terrible. By the way, we mentioned at the beginning of the segment a little bit about Anthem Gold. I want to invite you to go to anthemvault.com. AnthemVault.com. If you go there, we're talking about gold and silver. You can get into gold and silver. Easy to do. Use the promo code BEN at AnthemVault.com. Those guys will get you set up. It's a terrific system. Easy to buy. Easy to sell. AnthemVault.com. We're back with our guest, Mark Walters, after this break. And welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show here on RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network. Very excited about our next guest here today, Mark Walters. He is with USCCA. And Mark, thanks for being on the show with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Thanks. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. I want to start out with you. We were teasing this earlier today. We've got a story up today at benswann.com about Chipotle.
Yes.
Say it ain't so. Banning guns, caving to pressure from Bloomberg-backed group. I love Chipotle on every level. In every way there is to love Chipotle, I love them. But come on, guys. I mean, what are they doing here? So this all comes out of Texas, correct?
Yeah, this comes out of Texas. You know, I have some issues with this. I'm going to be talking about this on my national radio show on Armed American Radio on Sunday, which is part of the United States Concealed Carry Association. And I have some real issues with the way this went down. And what this stems from is an Open Carry Texas group down in Dallas who has now shown themselves on two issues to get out there and make a point. You know, they're carrying firearms to make political statements with rifles slung over their shoulders, walking into Chipotle restaurants. I want to make this very clear. That's legal to do in Texas. However, just because it's legal to do doesn't mean it's the smart thing to do in today's political environment. This is not the way to get their ultimate goal across, which is to legalize open carry in Texas. And I have some real issues with that in today's environment. The Moms Demand Action nutcases went ballistic, fired off a couple petitions, forcing Chipotle to cave to political pressure. That's not the way to advance the open carry cause. This is now the second time that this group has done this. And it's just not the way to make a statement. So I'm open for that discussion any day of the week.
So a couple of things on that. So the group that went in there, the Open Carry Texas group that went in there, and according to the story that we have up at benswann.com, apparently they were saying that this is something they've done before. Typically they actually send someone who's unarmed inside first, and they advise the restaurant as well as talk to patrons in the restaurant to let them know. Again, you don't think that's a good strategy?
No, it absolutely is not a good strategy. This is the second time it's blown up in our faces, and those of us who fight the fight every day would recommend using a different tactic. Let's go through the legislative process. Let's work with Texas legislators. Our ultimate goal is to get open carry passed in Texas, but this is not the way to do it in today's political climate when you have a mainstream media who is more than willing to give Moms Demand Action every bit of press they don't deserve in a situation like this, and it resonates and makes every gun owner look bad. This is not the way to do it. I disagree with their tactics entirely.
So would you say that they should simply not carry them into restaurants, period?
It's not working. Let me put it that way. It isn't working. It's backfiring every time it's being tried. So a new tactic, a new strategy has to be employed here.
Okay, and what new strategy would you recommend?
I would recommend working through the legislative process in this case. I'm a big advocate of open carry. I open carry my firearms every opportunity I get. I live in Georgia in an open carry state. It's not a gold open carry state. We have to have a permit in order to openly carry our firearms, of which I do have. But I'm not, open carry, you shouldn't be openly carrying a firearm simply to make a political statement. There's a time and a place for it. And walking into a Chipotle restaurant with an SKS or an AR-15 draped over your shoulder so you can stand there and take a photograph isn't the way to do it to get our point across. Unfortunately, in this political climate, we've got to make a change. It isn't working, guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it didn't work in Chipotle because the restaurant has now gone forward and banned guns from being carried into their restaurants, which I think, the point also has to be made that it is a private company and it's a private property because it is their restaurant. They have the right, certainly, to do that. I don't think anyone would argue that they don't have the right to do so. But I want to talk to you about this idea of what you mentioned a minute ago about the Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. This Moms Demand Action group, this is the game progressives play, right? Where it's always about coming up with some very soft and cuddly name to make you sound innocent. Yeah. This is a Michael Bloomberg-backed group, is it not?
This is a Michael Bloomberg front group. We're looking into doing some research. I can't talk about everything yet because we don't have all of it in front of us. But there are some fascinating, interesting points about this group. This woman comes out of nowhere, supposedly sitting at her kitchen table, and in less than 48 hours has lots of money and lots of media coverage. This is Michael Bloomberg money. It stinks of Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg has made it a point to spend upwards over $50 million this election season alone to take away your firearm rights. That's his goal. That's what he wants to do. Michael Bloomberg is one of the biggest enemies the Second Amendment of this country has ever had, and we will fight back and we'll defeat him because we have the facts and we have freedom on our side.
So when you say that he is devoting this money, he has a litmus test for candidates that he's backing, and it is the Second Amendment issue, right?
It absolutely does. We just passed, you've probably heard, I'm talking to you from about 40 miles north of downtown Atlanta, and you've probably heard the Guns Everywhere bill, right? Georgia's Guns Everywhere bill. The anti-gun groups are freaking out. Bloomberg spent a ton of money down in this state to try to derail the Safe Carry Protection Act, not the Guns Everywhere bill. And normally, I would try to take the language back from the freedom haters, the gun haters, the media, and the liars and the Michael Bloombergs. Common sense gun control legislation, for example. There's no such thing, common sense, about a sign that says no guns allowed that a criminal will ignore. My idea of common sense is warning. heavily armed. Any attempt to harm our children will be met with deadly force. That's common sense. So they hijacked the language. We need to take it back. In this case, they used the term guns everywhere as if it was a bad thing. I've adopted it on my radio show and at the USCCA. I like the term guns everywhere because guns do belong everywhere in the hands of law-abiding citizens where they have a law-abiding right to be. So, again, we need to take the language back from these people, and we need to be the ones that are in control because, again, we have the facts and we have freedom on our side. I believe freedom will always prevail. But Bloomberg was here spending his money trying to derail this legislation, and he failed, just like he failed in Colorado. Now, he won in Connecticut, he won in New York. Those are Democrat-controlled states. However, we now have 50 states in the country with some form of concealed carry legislation on the books, including the newest, Illinois. Hats off to Illinois. I never thought I'd be saying that.
Yeah, certainly so. Yeah, I want to talk to you on the other side of this next break more about concealed carry specifically, but let's stay on the Bloomberg thing for a minute, just because here's a guy who really has devoted himself to this cause, and I feel like there's multiple fronts, and I'm sure you would agree, multiple fronts where this is happening. You have the political front, you have the candidates that he's going for, you have the specific amendments and referendums that he's battling against. What about in terms of what we're seeing specifically out of the media, where there is such a culture right now that is anti-gun, and it's demonizing guns, it's demonizing gun ownership, it's demonizing anyone who would possess a firearm, to the point where, you've got just crazy stuff going on out there. A kid chews a Pop-Tart in the shape of a gun and gets suspended from school because it's almost like this idea that if you regard or point your finger like a gun, that is considered obscene. It's all becoming like this obscenity surrounding guns. How do you overcome that battle? Because the political thing is one thing, but fighting that cultural battle.
The cultural battle is being driven by the media. Ben, that's an incredible question. It's a great question, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's a difficult one to answer. The reason being is this is the power of the mainstream media. When I say mainstream media, I'm talking about network media, 24-hour news coverage, and it's also the danger that we face in this country from 24-hour news coverage. I believe, and I have stated publicly on my national radio show many times, that I believe the mainstream media to be the single most dangerous entity we face in this country today. The mainstream media will outlive this gun-hating, freedom-hating socialist president that we currently have. The mainstream media isn't going anywhere. It's taking different forms, and it's taking different shapes in the form of the Internet and so forth. However, this is what permeates the elite culture at the top of the media. And it isn't reflective of what Americans are, the boots on the ground on the streets. My kids still play with guns outside, little toy guns. My kids still chase each other around and say bang, bang, as do the neighborhood kids. Okay? It's not bad. It's fun. It's healthy. It's normal behavior. But what the mainstream media does is takes this political cause, they grab on this, they latch onto this, and they make 1 or 2% of the population, because of the power of their medium, appear to be the vast majority in this country. And it's that old propaganda. Lie, lie, lie. Control the media, control the message, control the message, control the people. And that's exactly what's happening. The mainstream media is no longer objective in this country, but they are 100% pushing a political agenda. In this case, it happens to be a leftist political agenda, and it's all filtering down from the White House. They are literally propaganda machines at this point. There is no such thing as objectivity, and anybody with a clear mind can see that when they watch the news. Very, very dangerous and very difficult to overcome. That's why discussions like this on your show are so important. It's why the United States Concealed Carry and Concealed Carry Magazine is so vital. It's why Armed American Radio is vital and so forth, to counter these lies coming from a very small few who control so much.
And it is interesting to watch it's almost schizophrenic in terms of how media covers all this. I want to talk to you more about that. Again, this is Mark Walters from USCCA on with us today. Mark, stick around. We're going to go to a break. We'll be right back with more from you. And welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show here on RBN. This segment, by the way, brought to you by our friends at SnoopWall.com. If you have a smartphone, specifically an Android, encourage you to check out Snoopwall. Go to benswann.snoopwall.com, and there you can get 20 to 50% off. Essentially, it prevents your apps on your smartphone from being accessed by hackers and by government agencies who are using those apps by hacking them to essentially slave or monitor your microphone or camera on your smartphone. We talked about this before. Cassidy Wolf, who's Miss Teen USA, had some 17-year-old guy recording her through her smartphone because he was able to hack one of her apps and accessed her microphone as well as her camera, and she didn't even know her phone was being used that way. So check them out. It's your Port Authority, snoopwall.com. Go benswann.snoopwall.com. On the phone with us this segment is Mark Walters. He's with USCCA. And Mark, thanks, first of all, for staying through the break.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's a fun conversation and one that needs to be had.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this. We were talking about media beforehand, but I really think media, they're so schizophrenic on this issue because here's the thing. All this messaging that's coming through media is guns are bad, guns are bad, guns are bad, right? Anyone who has one only wants it for one purpose, to kill.
Right.
The only reason that you would have a gun is because you have a plan to harm someone, right? And so there's this whole conversation happening here. But then you've got cinema and movies where every movie that's out there that's going to make any kind of money is full of guns. And they're not guns being used by the bad guys solely.
This is hypocrisy, and this is hypocrisy in its purest form. When Michael Bloomberg stands in front of a microphone and talks about guns being bad, surrounded by his personal security, armed security details, it's hypocrisy in its purest form. When Michael Bloomberg talks about banning sodas and salt because it's bad for you, while standing on the platform at the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest, welcoming everybody to New York's Coney Island so they can shove 67 hot dogs down their throat in less than 9 minutes. This is hypocrisy. And look, I almost hate to say this to my fellow Americans, but I'm past it, and the truth needs to be told. We hear the politically correct term, low-information voter. It's not low-information voter. It's stupidity. Look up the definition in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Don't blame me. But this administration and the mainstream media depend, because they are working together. They're working in conjunction. I've never seen a president so protected by a slobbering love affair media as I have with this guy. It's unbelievable. And the dumbing down of America we're witnessing every single day on television, in the movies, in the news. And the thing is about this that fascinates me is that this president, this administration, and this mainstream media require a certain level of stupidity in order to further their agenda. There is no doubt in my mind that they are doing everything possible to keep from educating people of the truth. The fact of the matter is these people are afraid of guns. They don't understand guns. They don't give a darn about understanding guns. Every time there's a shooting, it's an AR-15, even when it's not. And when the news comes out that it's not an AR-15, they continue to demonize the AR-15 as CNN did at the Navy Yard shooting. It's unbelievable. We see
That's
that
right.
everywhere.
Well, and the statistics, listen, as you said, the facts and the statistics are so incredibly warped and twisted. Because again, you go back to the issue of just the rifles, the AR-15, the assault rifle as it's called, which of course we all know is a ridiculous use of terminology. But the so-called assault rifle that is used in these mass shootings, rifles are responsible for so few deaths in this country. More people, as you know, Mark, are killed with hands and feet each year than are killed with rifles and hammers. 5 times as many people stabbed to death than die with the rifles.
I appreciate you saying that, too, about assault rifles and for getting these statistics out, because they're very, very true. The other side has to lie. They don't have the facts on their side, and we do have the facts on our side, and those statistics are just evidence of that. But I say we take the terminology back, and this is something we need to talk about. An assault rifle. My AR-15, I have 6 of them in my safe. None of them are assault rifles. Assault is an action. So if I beat you over the head with a stick, did I assault you with a stick, or did I use an assault stick?
That's right.
Let's get the terminology correct. I didn't use an assault stick. I assaulted you with a stick. So, but this is the scary demonization. And, I'll tell you how effective it's been. I had a gun shop owner on my radio show Sunday night as I was broadcasting live from Tampa who used the term. He says, well, we're seeing assault rifles move off the shelves. And I had to correct him because it permeates. We begin, and this is what the mainstream media is counting on. Control the media, control the message, control the message, control the masses, and they've been very effective with that.
Well, and you certainly weaken the terminology to the point where it becomes a lazy person's terminology, right? So it's just easier to say assault rifle than to have to define which particular rifle you're talking about. Just call it assault because that's easier. And so for the general public, it becomes, as you said, it just becomes part of the terminology. Assault rifle, assault rifle, assault rifle, which obviously carries a connotation of being, again, a dangerous, diabolical weapon that can only be used for nefarious or evil purposes.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are let's go to the gun safety groups that are trying to build themselves as gun safety. Will someone show me a Brady campaign-sponsored firearm safety course?
Right.
The crickets. There's crickets. You hear them?
Yep.
There are none. The National Rifle Association, who they demonize from a political standpoint with the help of the mainstream media and this administration, teaches millions of Americans and school children across this country, millions, every year with the Eddie Eagle program, gun safety, teaches and trains more NRA-certified instructors and training counselors across this country than any other organization, teaching gun safety at gun ranges to millions and millions of adults and children alike in this country every single day. And you never hear a word of it from the mainstream media.
Well, because in their mind, it's not about gun. As you said, it's all lies, right? So it's all propaganda and lies. It's not about actually teaching people how to be safe or how to properly use a firearm. It's about controlling the way they view them, to say it's like the abstinence campaign, right? The only safe sex is no sex. Well, they're doing that concept with guns, which is the only safe gun is no gun. There is no gun safety. The only gun safety is to take them away.
There's a couple things that I want people to walk away from the conversation with feeling good. Okay, we can beat up on the anti-gunners all day long. It's easy to do and it's fun to do because, again, we have the facts and truth on our side. But I want people to walk away and remember this, that freedom, and sometimes it comes at great cost and sometimes it takes a while, but freedom will always prevail. The Constitution will be here after Barack Obama and his gun-hating administration and this hypocrite, this liar, Eric Withholder. They'll all be gone. The U.S. Constitution will continue to remain intact. America will survive. And while the mainstream media is doing everything they can to demonize you as a law-abiding gun owner, over 120 million of you are mainstream America. Remember this. You are mainstream America, not them. They are the elitist slobs. They're the ones that don't have the truth and facts on their side. And while they continue to try to demonize you every single day relentlessly, state after state, local municipality after local municipality continues to win on the gun front, with very few exceptions in Democrat-controlled states. We'll go there in a second. Illinois now has concealed carry. Milwaukee or Wisconsin behind that. Colorado, gun-hating legislators were ousted. We're working on fighting through the courts these unconstitutional Democrat gun control laws. And keep this in mind. It is the Democrat Party as an institution that is coming after your firearms freedoms, period.
Well, and I think we also have to watch out for, and I want you to stay through. Can you stay through the next break also?
Sure can.
Okay, good. I want to talk to you more about that too. But there are a lot of Republican legislatures and legislators on state levels who are running away from some of these right to carry bills as well. And we have to confront that as well, because the assumption that someone's going to stand up for your right, and it is your right, it is not a granted right by the Constitution. It is a right recognized by the Constitution, for self-protection and to carry those firearms. Just because someone is in the Republican Party doesn't mean they're defending that right. So we have to keep an eye on that as well. Mark, stick around. We're going to talk with you more about this, plus about the future and how do we affect the young people to help them recognize this right truly belongs to them. We'll talk more with Mark Walters of USCCA when we come back. And welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. It is hour 2 here on the Ben Swann Radio Show, and we're talking today with Mark Walters of USCCA. Mark, glad that you have stayed with us through the break and into this next segment. We were talking before the break about media and about the future and where it heads. I got to tell you, I have a daughter who is in 7th grade. She's about to be 13, and just wrote a paper for school. She had to take a position paper, and I wasn't aware of what she was writing on, and she wrote it on gun rights. And she wrote this paper, and she showed it to me, and I started looking at it, and was incredibly impressed by the different ways that she was able to articulate, statistics, and the fact that I mentioned that statistic about 5 times as many people die from being stabbed to death each year, according to the FBI, than die from being shot with a rifle.
That doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's the gun is evil, and the person who wished the gun is evil. That fact that you just gave doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it came from the FBI. We don't want to talk about that. We want to call it an assault rifle and move on from the facts. These are the facts that need to come out. So thanks again for repeating that.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that she says in this report as well is she points out that anywhere from 800,000 to 2 million people are actually protected from a crime because of a firearm. Now, there's a statistic that you never hear, even among those who are trying to bring out some of these stats. The fact that you have as many as 2 million people in this country who their life is defended with a firearm, you would never allow that statistic to creep into media at any point, right?
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm one of those numbers, and I put that number out on a regular basis. It almost sounds like she was reading one of my columns when
she might have
800,000 to 2.5 million, because we discussed that quite a bit. Let me give those numbers, and let me give you some facts. Gary Kleck in the early 1990s. Gary is a far left leaning, avowed liberal, by the way. Okay, did a study relative to guns being used, what we refer to as DGUs, defensive gun uses, in America. And there is no database for that. The FBI doesn't keep a record of that, as they do violent crime. Unfortunately, and that's because a lot of them go unreported, as my incident does. The Clinton Justice Department, his study found upwards of close to 2.5 million DGUs, or defensive gun uses, per year. A definitive study. No one else has even bothered, with the exception of a couple liberal groups who got as low as 180,000 per year. The Clinton Justice Department gave the 800,000 number that your beautiful daughter's quoted. And either way you slice it, when you take the lowest number or the highest number and divide it by 365 days, you come up with hundreds to thousands of times a day that an armed American uses a firearm lawfully to defend his life from a criminal scumbag who would take his from them. Now, I was on my way to work in November of 2001 or 2002. Time is flying now. Wrote about it in my book. I don't even remember what year it is. But about 12 years ago, when an automobile pulled in front of me at a traffic light, long story short, carjacking attempt off the car off my front left bumper unfolded. They turned their attention towards me. I lawfully drew my lawfully carried Glock sidearm during the commission of a forcible felony against myself and another motorist. And I can tell you and your listeners how amazing it is what a Glock staring at someone, how effective that can be, even when it isn't made to function. Because I never had to pull the trigger and stop the impending crime against myself and another motorist. I went home alive that day because I had a firearm. My daughter is about going to be 12, about your daughter's age. My daughter was 2 weeks old at the time. My daughter has her father today, and my son would subsequently be born. And the woman in the car off my front left bumper was able to make it through the traffic light that day because I had a gun. And this is a conversation I'll have with anybody that wants to talk with me about it.
Well, and that's such an important conversation because the reality is exactly what you just said, that you have the power when you are armed in that way to protect not only yourself and your life, but to protect other people around you as well. And Correct. This idea that only law enforcement should be carrying a weapon is so ludicrous when, number one, police only respond to a crime after it's been committed. Well, and laws, and I was just going to say real quick too, and laws only punish a criminal after they've committed the crime.
That's correct, and I want to point this out. We hear a lot of this. Again, this is about taking the language back. We hear about first responders on the scene. Now, my wife happens to work at a university not too far down the road from Kennesaw, She works at Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia, not too far away from where the FedEx shooting occurred just a couple of weeks ago is what I was trying to get out of my mouth there. I apologize. And it was interesting in that particular case because here we saw the first responders by the dozens, as we see all the time after one of these lunatics goes on a mass shooting spree in a gun-free zone, when all of the news media and all of the coverage clearly showed 2 no-gun signs on the doors of the building where the individual shot his way into with his gun, showing the ineffectiveness of these ludicrous gun-free killing zones that FedEx unfortunately has in place at their facility, unwisely as we've recently seen. But going back to the first responders, it wasn't the police officers on the scene that were the first responders. It was the individuals who had to face the lunatic. Those are the first responders. You are the first responders. The police officers and medics that arrive afterwards are the second responders. And the first responders must be enabled to be able to defend themselves when this happens, because guess what? It's going to happen again, and I can guarantee you it's going to happen in a gun-free zone. That's a fact. Yeah, it will happen again.
It is a fact. It is a fact. Look, the reality is, and I appreciate this conversation so much because I am absolutely committed, as are you, to this idea that, look, people who are over the age of 40, progressives have already figured out, people who are over the age of 40, it doesn't matter what they think, right? Because you're not going to try to change the way those people think. But it's young people and it's kids and it's people in high school today. They're the ones who are receiving the brunt of this messaging, and we have to work very hard to make sure that they are not propagandized into believing these things. You made a point earlier about kids. You give any little boy and many little girls a toy to play with, and inevitably at some point they're going to turn that toy into a gun. Even if it's a car, you can give a little boy a toy car and he'll turn it sideways and start shooting at somebody with it. Or the car will have rockets on it, right? It's not because it's this corruption that we put into these kids' minds to make them violent. But my point is that naturally people are not scared of this or offended by it. And that over time, we propagandize them to become afraid of it. And that's where I think we really have a lot of work to do, to really work with young people and to change the thinking, or combat at least the thinking that people like, bringing this full circle, Mayor Michael Bloomberg is pouring his fortune into attempting to propagandize young people.
And let me point out how we can fix those broken people, because those people, we call them hoplophobes. Hoplophobia is the irrational fear of a firearm. And here's how we fix those people. It has worked every single time, and I'm sure you'll support me on this after you hear what I'm about to say. When you know someone who is petrified of a firearm, or if you know someone like that Democrat across the street who hates your guns, or whoever it is that might be scared of guns, maybe it's your mother-in-law, maybe it's your father-in-law, maybe it's your brother or a long-lost cousin, here's how you fix them. You take them shooting. You take them to a range, and guess what inevitably happens? You never hear, I have never heard anyone say to me after a trip to the range, after I've educated them, I've never had anyone say to me, oh my God, that sucked, I never want to do that again.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah. In fact, it's the opposite. It's, wow, that was unbelievable. I never knew that could be so much fun. When can we do that again?
Well, and as you said, because it's the fear of the irrational. There's no real rational fear for seeing a firearm or holding a firearm or using a firearm. There's no rational fear to that. It's this propagandized fear that when you put it in your hand, you're somehow going to turn into this monster. It's just a tool.
When they learn and when they're taught properly and have that fear removed, you can fix them, because they realize guns aren't bad, guns are good, and guns save lives.
Right on. Mike, thanks so much for being with us. Folks, you can find out more about what they're doing over at usconcealcarry.com. Actually, Michael, can you stay one more segment?
Sure, why not?
I'm going to keep you for one more. I want to talk to you about some concealed carry statistics when we come back. And welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show. Okay, Mark Walters with USCCA is on with us. Mark, I was going to let you go in the last one. I thank you for sticking around through this one, because I remembered right as I was saying goodbye to you, I wanted to talk to you specifically about concealed carry stats. So back in 2012, I actually did some reporting for the Fox station here in Cincinnati. Well, I didn't do some reporting. I was working for them at the time, but did some specific reporting on the issue of concealed carry numbers. And one of the important things that many people may not realize is statistically, you'll hear people like Rachel Maddow, and you'll hear people on the network news who will talk about how concealed carry in states where it's been implemented, that crime has actually gone up. But the fact is, in most states where concealed carry is implemented, that's actually not true. It's the opposite. Is that correct?
Let's get the numbers right. Gun ownership since Barack Obama's presidency is at historic highs. Don't take my word for the statement you're about to hear from me. Go to the FBI.gov crime statistic page and view it for yourself at Department of Justice. Crime is at an all-time low and continuing to drop. Violent crime, murders, rapes, robberies are at all-time lows. That's not my made-up figure. Go to the FBI.gov and verify that for yourself. Meanwhile, hear what I just said to you. Gun ownership is at all-time highs in this country. In fact, the largest percentage of new gun owners right now and concealed carry permit holders across the country, the fastest growing segment, not the largest percentage, the fastest growing segment is women. Women are empowering themselves across the country, unaware of what Rachel Maddow and the 56 people that watch her now?
Something
like that. Really hear from Rachel Maddow. Let's take a look at Chicago. Let's take a look at Washington, D.C. And Chicago's a fun one to choose because the hypocrisy there is just, you need a napkin when you watch these people on television. You got to clean up their hypocrisy. It drips from their face. Let's take the police chief there, McCarthy, who cannot control violent crime in the city of Chicago to the tune of 50, 60, 70 murders in a weekend. Shootings rampant. Not because law-abiding citizens have guns, but because they can't control their gang and their drug problem. This man stands up 2 weeks ago at a press conference and says, we got a problem in Chicago, because these guns are flowing in, from Indiana. We need tougher gun control regulations here in Chicago. Guns have been banned in Chicago since 1982. What do they want to do? Invent invisible spray paint for them? It's ludicrous. The lie continues.
Well, but, and again, statistically, I mean, look at the state of Ohio, for instance. Ohio brought in concealed carry. I believe it was passed in 2004. That's right, 2004. Right. If you go back and you look at the statistics and all the major crime categories, aggravated assault, rape, murder. If you go down the list of those major crime statistics, there is only one statistic where crime has actually risen since concealed carry, and that is in the form of burglary. Correct. Not someone holding someone up with a gun.
Stealing, breaking into an automobile.
That correct. Burglary. So essentially, the only place where crime has risen are crimes in which another person is not victimized in person. Their property is victimized.
Briefly about Ohio. You live in a great state. I was born in Cincinnati, have a lot of relatives in Dayton and Springboro and up in Cleveland and throughout the state. And Ohio has made some fantastic changes since 2004 when the legislation passed and signed and went into effect in 2005. So as a result of that, you've seen some great things happen in the state of Ohio, and as you just said, crime begins to continue to decrease in the state. You still have a little bit of work to do in Ohio relative to some of the laws in effect, but the numbers are going in the right direction. And yet again, we see the facts unfolding. Now, the same thing happened in Michigan, and the same thing happened in Wisconsin. And here's what's fascinating, and you experienced this in Ohio: the doom and gloomers, the naysayers. There's going to be blood in the street. It's going to be the Wild West. We're going to have shootouts on the street corners. Restaurants are going to be bloodbaths. And when it doesn't unfold that way, do they come back and correct the mistakes that they make? Because they're not mistakes, they're lies. What they are is fear-mongering and scare to gin up fear and frighten misinformed, stupid people who don't pay attention to what I refer to as headline surfers. So when the facts come out after the case, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, and these statistics that you gave are there to prove what we have been saying from the get-go, they're never corrected by the mainstream media. It's very important you continue to put those numbers out.
Well, and as you said, too, I mean, when you talk about issues like rape, when you're talking about issues like murder and aggravated assault,
Right.
And statistically, I mean, we're not talking about just stats here. We're talking about individual people. And the numbers of people who are being affected by these crimes is falling, meaning there are hundreds upon thousands of people who are not being victimized in this way. And you're watching year after year those numbers continue to drop as, at the same time, year after year, the numbers of people purchasing and becoming a firearm owner are on the rise. You have to be in this for the ideological reasons that you're stating if you refuse to report the facts here. Because what you're really saying is it doesn't matter if people are actually safer. It doesn't matter if fewer women are actually raped. It doesn't matter if there are fewer murders in our state, because it doesn't fit with our narrative, and so it's not something we want to talk about. I mean, think about this. As a politician, every politician in the country should be jumping on top of concealed carry, saying we want it for our state because we want to make sure people in our state are safer and protected and not harmed. But they don't do that.
It's the Republican Party. We discussed very briefly the Democrats as an institution coming after your guns, and I defy anyone to argue. And I'll make that point. I want anyone who wants to call me or send me an email to mark@armedamericanradio.org that can show me any Republican-controlled state legislature that is running on a gun control agenda. It isn't going to happen. Where the gun control agenda is being pushed through are Barack Obama's minions in the Democrat-controlled states in Colorado, Maryland, Illinois, where they tried and they failed, Maryland, Connecticut, New York, etc. This is a Democrat issue, and the truth has to come out as to what's happening here. And you mentioned that there are Republicans, and there are, but not as an institution. There are individual Republicans in these Democrat-controlled strongholds who care more about getting elected by the liberal part of their constituency base that they need to keep power, that are pushing this political agenda and ignoring the facts that you and I are talking about here today.
Well, absolutely. And to that point, it is critically important that people realize that exactly what you just said, that politicians at their core are cowards. Very few politicians are brave people. And so, what you don't want is to see the culture continue to shift away from defending the rights of the individual to own and possess a firearm, because the politicians, regardless of what party they are in, if they think the culture is slipping away from them, or they think for the most part the public is slipping away, they will change their positions. So it's important that I
would implore your listeners to pay very careful attention as to what's happening in Connecticut right now. Connecticut passed the most ludicrous unconstitutional gun ban in the history of the United States shortly after Newtown, and took advantage of knee-jerk, and it was political posturing, the most disgusting political posturing I've ever seen. A U.S. president who immediately exploited tragedy. And for anybody that thinks that the gun control agenda that began being pushed within hours of Newtown was somehow spontaneous, you go look up the word I mentioned earlier, that was, you need to look the description up in Webster's, and that's stupidity. The fact of the matter is this agenda was on the table for 4 years. We know it because he pulled the Brady campaign. In a second term, he had to keep things under the radar, and in a second term, we knew this was going to happen. We've been telling you about it for years. He exploited that terrible tragedy for political gain, and unfortunately it worked for the low-information voter who said, oh, we got to do something. And it's feel-good legislation. In the meantime, watch what's happening there, because these laws have been enacted. You have hundreds of thousands of Connecticut residents, law-abiding citizens, who were turned into felons overnight that are not complying. Now the state has a problem. What do? We don't have enough prison beds to put the people we made felons overnight in. Now you've got the pro-gun groups in Connecticut begging them to follow the law and see what happens.
Right on. All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much. Really do appreciate your time over the last hour. And folks, if you missed any of that conversation, you get it at youtube.com/Ben Swann Reality Check, and you can check out the full interview there. And again, if you want to find Mark, you can do so online at usconcealcarry.com/author/Mark. Thanks again, Mark. Welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show. This segment brought to you by our friends over at Anthem Vault, anthemvault.com. If you're in the market for gold and silver, not everybody is, but if you are, I would send you over to them before anybody else at this point. I think they do such a great job, especially if you're new to the gold and silver game. You know, these guys make it very easy for you to purchase. Anthem Vault is just a terrific setup. Very similar to a Bitcoin exchange. You can buy gold. You can sell gold there. You can link it to your bank card. And if you go to anthemvault.com and you use the promo code BEN, you'll receive not only free gold and silver for signing up, but also you will receive a chance to win $500 and a gold and silver giveaway. Check them out, anthemvault.com. Zach Bohannon, so you came across kind of an interesting story right now.
Yeah, I was in California last week in the L.A. area, the greater L.A. area for the most part of the week, and I kept driving by the signs for Dodger Stadium. I'm told it's difficult to access, not easy to find if you're not from that area. I ran across a story that involved the Dodgers. Apparently,
and there you go.
There I go. Apparently, this incident happened last night in their minor league system. Two AAA Dodgers minor leaguers, same team, got into a heated argument Tuesday night that led to a physical confrontation, one player having part of his ear bitten off.
What? Is Mike Tyson...
Tyson and Holyfield, they're playing AAA for the Dodgers, apparently.
What the heck? How do you end up with part of your ear bitten?
Well, okay.
Other than the obvious. Someone bit it.
Other than the obvious. So, two guys were involved in this. Miguel Olivo bit off part of Alex Guerrero's ear after the two exchanged words during the AAA game in Salt Lake City. Guerrero was in the far end of the dugout. He went to the front to get his bat and helmet to hit. As he walked across, Olivo decked him.
Okay.
And then the two were separated by teammates in the dugout, and Olivo had part of Guerrero's ear in his mouth.
Delicious.
Yummy. I mean, it goes on and on, but Guerrero is the guy that got his ear bitten off. He's hitting .368, 10 homers, 29 RBI in the Pacific Coast League. Of course, they issued the official statement. The Dodgers general manager, he's disappointed to hear about the altercation. The team is looking into it. It's something we don't condone, and it's something we don't think is constructive.
You
really?
Don't?
Biting a guy's ear off isn't constructive?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish here. It could be very constructive.
Apparently,
I have an ear collection at home.
Right. Apparently, Olivo, the guy that did the biting, has had issues with his temper before. He's had a hot temper on the field. A few years ago, he threw a wild punch during a dust-up during a game. I can't imagine getting so angry. How crazed do you have to be to bite another person's ear off?
Yes, seriously. I mean, anger is one thing. Being ready for a fight is another thing. Wanting to punch somebody's face in, I can understand. But at what point does it turn into, and bite your ear off?
Yeah, but I'd like to point out that this incident did not happen involving a firearm. There was no use of a firearm here. So I'm saying that bad things can happen without the help of a firearm.
They certainly can.
And so I fully expect, though, maybe the government to come in and say we're going to issue a rule about biting. You can't bite. You can't. But if you're the general manager, what do you do? Do you punish these guys, or do you fine them, or do you bench them? What do you do?
Make them go to get coffee together later and
sit down and have a hug, maybe sing Kumbaya.
See if we can work this out.
Yeah, maybe.
You're going to have to be in ear therapy with them.
That's right. You're going to have to get sensitivity training.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other level of anger and, like you said, just kind of just a ferocious rage that overcomes you.
I don't obviously condone it either. It's one of those stories, though, that our friend Elizabeth might have in her arsenal.
You would think so.
Yeah.
That's her kind of story.
That's
right?
her kind of story, and so we thought we'd toss one of those in. But I don't know. I think it's going too far in sports. People get out of control. I love sports. I follow sports. I love baseball. Is my favorite sport. You follow, I think, football.
I do.
Right?
I do.
And, but I guess
it's kind of hard to bite someone's ear off in football.
It's hard to bite someone's ear off unless you're on the sidelines and you guys take your helmets off. But it's I don't know. I think sports can make people crazy. That's the ugly side of it.
Yeah.
And if you can't control your temper, if you can't control yourself, then maybe you don't need to be playing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Maybe
Definitely so. Well, those guys are getting jacked up on so much stuff too.
Yeah, that's true. You never know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It could be the roid rage. You don't know. Although I don't know how juiced those guys are in AAA. But one guy is hitting .368, so
you want to get to the majors.
That ain't bad. Yeah, that you do anything you can.
Yeah.
Right.
So that could be part of it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Just having one of those days. Hey, over at benswan.com, by the way, I just wanted to update folks. We told you about this story a few weeks ago about this Occupy Wall Street protester. I don't know if you remember. She was the one who was claimed that she was grabbed. Her breast was grabbed by the police officer, and she was facing up to 7 years in prison because she elbowed the cop in the face. And so she was facing up to 7 years. Found guilty of assaulting the police officer. Well, a sentence was handed down on this. The story reads, Occupy Wall Street protester Cecily McMillan has been sentenced to 3 months in jail. She will get 3 months in jail and 5 years of probation for assaulting a police officer during a March 2012 OWS demonstration. The sentence handed down on Monday. The 25-year-old will spend 3 months in prison for elbowing a New York City police officer in the face during an Occupy Wall Street protest 2 years ago. As we reported, she was facing up to 7 years in prison for the incident in which she claims the officer grabbed her breast so hard that he left bruises. So I just wanted to update that, let folks know kind of what had happened with her because she was facing such a long prison sentence. I mean, I guess there are different ways of viewing it. I'm not even sure that you should get 3 months in prison for elbowing someone in the face. It's an elbow in the face. I mean, the major league guy isn't going to get 3 months in prison for biting someone's ear off.
You guarantee it. No, they get off scot-free.
You know, she elbows a cop in the face. You go to prison for 3 months, and he bites someone's ear, and it's like, well, we're not sure what we're going to do with you, but we don't condone it.
We don't condone it. We certainly don't support this as an organization. CYOB, CYOB, CYOB.
Exactly. I mean, the difference here, because let's face it, I mean, one is assault and the other is assault, right? And so if you're assaulting someone by biting their ear off, surely that has a higher threshold for punishment than elbowing a police officer in the face. No. Except for the fact they're a police officer.
Yeah. Therein lies the...
And so when you elbow a police officer, the charge is so much higher. And I still have a problem with that a little bit. I understand these guys put themselves in harm's way, and so that you want to create protections for them. But at the same time, is it more of a crime to elbow a police officer than it is to elbow my wife in the face? If somebody does that. For me personally, no, it's not. Because I think that... people need dignity and protection regardless of where they are. I don't know. I struggle a little bit with that, and I struggle with some of the punishment here, because I feel like, especially with this young lady, it doesn't mean that she's right, but I feel like a lot of what's being done here is an attempt to dissuade other protesters. Right.
Set an example, you're saying, or make a statement kind of deal?
Make an example out of her. I mean, you're going to prison for 3 months. First of all, you've been dragged through this process for 2 years. Should it really take 2 years of this to figure out whether or not she assaulted the police officer by elbowing him in the face? And then once you've gone through this for 2 years now you're going to serve 3 months in jail for it. And I don't know. It seems to me to be excessive, but maybe since it's not as excessive as 7 years in prison, then you feel like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, cool. She's fine, right?
3 months, you'll be out in no time.
It'll go by so quickly. Yeah, it's hard to believe that the Occupy Wall Street stuff was 2 years ago. It seems like not that long ago. But it's 2 years, and it's tough. You know, we weren't there. I haven't seen the bruises. Yeah. She's claimed that the guy left bruises on her chest. I don't know. People sometimes fabricate. People sometimes lie. But we want to believe the best about somebody. We want to believe that they're on the up and up. And it's not out of the realm of possibility, though, considering the stories that we've covered on this kind of thing. So.
Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. And even if she is completely in the wrong here, completely in the wrong, I'm still not convinced that you need to go to prison for 3 months.
Maybe
for an elbow to the face.
Yeah.
The cop ended up with a black eye and sensitivity to light. Ooh. It wasn't like his eyeball got dislodged and it was hanging out of socket.
Maybe a fine. Maybe a stiff
fine.
Ow,
my eye hurts for a day. 3 months in prison for you.
I need some eye drops.
Clear eyes.
Wow.
Okay, phone calls. We'll take them after the break. And welcome back to the Ben Swann Radio Show in our final segment of the day. And this segment brought to you by SnoopWall.com. Our friends over at SnoopWall are the port authority for your smartphone, Android device specifically. They're going to have models for iPhones and iPads out very soon. But right now, their focus is on the Android. That one is up and running. Essentially, it allows you to take your smartphone and through that smartphone, monitor the apps that are accessing your microphone and your camera. That way you know who's doing what with your phone. So check them out. Go to benswan.snoopwall.com. You can get 20 to 50% off. Again, that's benswan.snoopwall.com. All right, we'll go to the phones now in our final segment, and I believe we have Joe in Indiana. Joe, you're on.
Yes, hello, Ben. What a great show. I only caught the last part of your initial guest, the one that was talking about the gun control.
Yes.
And great guest. I hope you have him on again. I'll go into the archive, I hope, and dig up some of the information on how to access his website. But 2 points I wanted to make about getting people interested in guns or at least neutralizing people. What I did was I used to take when my kids were in the Cub Scouts, I used to take them shooting. And I used to take the Cub Scouts shooting. Although it's not a sanctioned event, I didn't get any cooperation from the scouting authorities at all, so I had to bring the kids without their uniforms on. And that blossomed into something really big. There's an when I used to fly before I got married, I used to belong to I was a pilot, and I belonged to the American Pilot Association, and they had a Project 2000, which I'd love to see organized among the shooting sports, and it was to take 1 million kids up flying. And what we could do as shooters is try to just bring the kids shooting. And you would be amazed. I mean, like your guest said, I have never had somebody tell me they had a bad time. So that would be one suggestion. And I took a page out of the American Pilots Association on that regard, and it does very, very well. Number two, the other point that was made was how women are getting into shooting. Now, this is not a scientific study, but just in my corner of Northwest Indiana, I'm in the medical profession, and a lot of nurses and LPNs and aides are talking about guns, and they are buying pistols. I just started noticing it within the last year because they were asking me questions about it. So, yeah, maybe there is a trend, and I hope you guys encourage it. And I try to talk to people about your program since I discovered it, and just try to be very positive and encouraging. But that's all I wanted to say.
No, that's terrific, and I thank you for sharing that with the show with folks as well. But yeah, to your point, I mean, look, there's some very interesting things that are happening, and I agree with you. I think you get young people out and you expose them to firearms as early as possible, because that's where you really teach about safety. I mean, people talk all the time about the need for safety with firearms and how people, they're so dangerous to have around kids. Well, one of the ways you make them safer is by educating kids on them, taking some of the mystique out of them, and not allowing kids to be educated on the use of a firearm by watching a movie, right?
Yes.
Or by watching television. And we don't do that with anything else.
And Ben, that Eddie Eagle tape, I'm not kidding you. My kids used to watch that when they were real young, and they had it all memorized. And they didn't even, you know what I mean? I hadn't even taken them out shooting. I used to take them to the range with me sometimes. But that's such a great tape if people can get a hold of that. And you want to know something? Your guest, I think, even made mention. The liberal media poo-poos it and tries to insult the Eddie Eagle program. But that's just get a hold of that tape if they can. It's a great tape as far as safety, and I do teach that when I'm at the range with the kids. But thank you.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Thanks so much. And that's, that's really where the importance of this movement has to move to, is how do you educate people? How do you wake them up? It's funny because if you take the same discussion about guns and you make it a discussion about sex, it's interesting how media takes the exact opposite positions. So, for instance, media will tell you, talk to your kids about sex. Don't let them learn about it from their friends or learn about it from media and learn about it from TV. Have these conversations with them. Discuss it with them. Talk to them about safety, about protecting themselves. They have all these terms that they use when they talk about sex. If you took that and just replaced the word sex with gun, you would have a very I think, reasonable discussion about gun control and safety. But they would never do that themselves. They'll never switch out that language themselves because they don't want you to have conversations with your kids about guns. They don't want you to talk to your kids about how to safely use a firearm, how to handle one. I took my son, I won't say how old he is, I took my son to a gun range recently, and we exposed him to some guns, and part of that process was how you hold a gun, and how you never put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to fire. And it was this whole process of just showing him a lot of the steps in terms of firearm safety. And this is how you conduct it safely. Because if you're running around with a Nerf gun in your backyard, you don't practice fire gun safety. Or firearm safety, excuse me. You don't practice safety with it, right? It's all war. It's all Call of Duty running through their head. And that's not what it is. So there's a great process for that, and we definitely need to encourage more of it. We definitely need to work to make sure that young people are properly educated on how to handle themselves and how to conduct themselves. And again, take a lot of the demonization out of it, because you do have media that's telling them all the time, I mean, look at this hero, look at this cool guy, he's got guns, he's shooting up this place, he's blowing up this thing and that thing, but if your dad has a gun, he's a bad guy. So we have to overcome that, and I hope that we will. I hope that with organizations like USCCA, we can take some of the stigma out.
Well, Ben, you recounted a quick conversation you had with one of your kids not long ago about guns, right? And he said, what if a bad guy? What did he say? What if a bad guy gets a hold of one of the guns?
Yeah, because we were giving away the AR-15.
That's right.
Right,
That's
and
right.
he said, why are you giving this away? And he said, because what if a bad guy gets it? And I said, yeah, what if a good guy gets it?
If a good guy gets it.
And he says, well, what if a villain gets it? He said, well, what if a hero gets it? And it was such a hard thing for him to even begin to grasp the idea that, there are people out there who might get this gun who won't be bad people and won't use it for terrible reasons. And that is a leap he's having to make because, again, of the stigma that is constantly being, these messages that are constantly sent to him through media telling him only bad people want to have access to this thing.
Yeah, and it's such a double standard, as we see all the time. I mean, I resent the fact that, schools will talk all day about how to practice quote unquote safe sex, and they'll do demonstrations and show pictures and all this stuff, and Planned Parenthood, we get fed all this. But when it comes to guns, no, we can't teach about that. We can't teach about that because we also can't teach about abstinence, but we can teach against guns or teach nothing about it.
Well, as I said, it's the abstinence argument used for guns. The same argument that they say is silly or ridiculous when it comes to sex is the argument they use for guns, which is the only safe gun is no gun. Right? There's no such thing as safe guns. The only safe gun is not having one at all. But if you say that about sex, they say, wait, that's ridiculous. That's naive to say that. And so there is such a double standard between the two, because look, let's face it, there are many, many ways of having a gun safely, and as our guest Mark was talking about, the opportunity he had in his life to defend his own life and someone else's life from a carjacking, he was able to do that because he was armed. Had he not been armed, he would not have had the opportunity to be able to defend himself and defend the woman who was with him or nearby. He wouldn't have been able to do so. And what bothers me the most, we talk about humanity being greater than politics. What bothers me the most is that anyone who says, nope, without question, just blanket statement, guns are bad, that person is simply saying, I don't care if people are safer. I don't care if you can give me an example where one person's life was spared or saved because somebody was armed. It doesn't matter to me. And as we talked about, 800,000 is the low number, 2 million is the high number. Anywhere from 800,000 to 2 million people in this country have had their life protected or have been protected from harm because they were armed. According to, again, Justice Department, FBI statistics. So the moment you say, nope, we need to take guns away from the individuals, what you're saying is, I don't care about those 2 million people. If they're harmed, if they're killed, if they're raped, if they're beaten, if their child loses a parent, if that parent loses a child. It doesn't matter to me because of my irrational hate for that tool. That is madness. Absolute madness. Guys, thanks for being with us. We're done for today, out of time, but you can always find me online when I'm not on air at benswann.com, where humanity is greater than politics. We'll talk to you tomorrow.